Ladies and gentlemen, we are back for another edition of the Quick Bricks NBA DFS podcast. This is your November 25th. This year has been rolling. We have 11 games on the slate today. Of course, this is the NBA DFS Quick Bricks podcast brought to you by the good guys over at Fantasy Degens. I'm Sean Mitchell, the host as usual. You can find me on Twitter at smitchell17. So hopefully you guys made some cash over the weekend. We, had a pretty decent slate on Saturday. Excuse me. A small four-gamer yesterday. Nonetheless, I was able to cash in on both lineups I played last night. It was a very low-scoring night. Montrezl Harrell helped me by scoring almost 60 in both of my lineups. That's really the only reason I cashed. My highest-scoring lineup last night was 262, but I was able to get into the cash on both lineups. So, of course, today we have an 11-game slate. Lots to talk about. Lots to talk about. So, it's a pretty nice-looking slate. There's not really any, major games that stick out. There are a couple that I like, obviously, we'll target. But, of course, let's go ahead and jump right into those games. We'll talk about the spreads, totals, and a little bit about the pace. And then I want to kind of talk about a tool that I found. I didn't find it, actually. I'm not going to take that credit. It was actually Mr. John and Pimba over at Fantasy Alarm turned me on to it. It's a free tool. It's really pretty handy. It shows a lot of different aspects of the game. We'll talk about that here in a minute. Nets at the Cavs is the first game. We have the Nets here on the back-to-back. Of course, they are without Kyrie once again. I don't even think he's making this road trip. So they're going to be without him for quite a while. So Spencer Dinwiddie chalk is going to continue. The guy's been actually absolutely raking in that position. So we know the Cavs are not very good against that spot as well. So this is another good spot. Cleveland minus 1.5 here at home, 217 on the total. You have the Nets coming in here as the seventh fastest team in the NBA on the season so far. Cleveland 25th. So massive pace up spot here for the Cavs. The Nets are going to continue to run with pace. Kyrie was a big part of that, but obviously Dinwiddie loves to run with pace as well. So it's not a change. It's really not a big change. They are really two alike. Of this, two of the same point guards as far as Dinwiddie and Irving goes. Of course, Irving has him on the handles, but Dinwiddie is really good. There's a big reason why they paid him to stay in Brooklyn, and he wanted to stay as well. So Dinwiddie's going to continue to be good, and his price is still cheap compared to what Kyrie's usually is. Magic at the Pistons. We have Detroit minus 4.5 here with a 207 total. Orlando, 29th in terms of pace. They're really slow. They've got a lot of injuries. And then Detroit, 24th. So this is a ugly game as far in terms of pace. But the usage usually is spread upon, two or three guys on each team. So those are the games that we don't mind to target because of the fact that we know that a few simple guys will be getting, most of the usage in those games. Moving along, Grizzlies at the Pacers. Indiana minus 8.5 here at home, 217 on the total. Memphis, 6th fastest team right now in the NBA as far as up to this point in the season. Indiana, 26th. So you have a massive pace-up spot here for Indiana. Now, this is another one of those spots that I said that the pace will actually be dictated more than likely by the home team because Indiana is a pretty good defensive team. And the Memphis is not. So this is one that I imagine, unless the Memphis starts off really hot, Indiana can totally control the pace in this game. So I don't believe it's as massive of a spot as, say, the Nets and Cleveland. And Cleveland, who doesn't play really good defense, the Nets can probably push the pace on them a little bit more. So this is one that obviously the spread is decently big, almost 9 here at home. Not a really big total at 217, so they're not really expecting a fast game. So a few tidbits on that one. The next game is obviously one we're going to want to look to target real heavy. It'll be our main focus of our game stacks. It's going to be the T-Wolves at the Hawks. Minnesota minus 3.5 here, 235 on the total, largest on the slate by far. Should be chalky. I'm sure there'll be a lot of chalky players in this one, but of course you have the T-Wolves third-ranked pace in terms of third-ranked fastest team in the NBA right now, and then Atlanta has moved to 12th. During the first week, they were almost dead last. They were in the top, or dead, fifth worst, sixth worst in terms of pace. So they've made a massive leap there in terms of pace, kind of getting back to where they were last year. The Kings at the Celtics. Of course, the Kings are on a back-to-back here. Boston is returning home from a 5-game road trip, so this one's a pretty interesting one. Of course, Boston is an 8.5-point home favorite here. The total has not been posted because I guess we're waiting on Kimba news. Bogdan looks like he may sit. He played last night, but right after the game they said he was questionable to play today, so that one will be one we'll be looking at. Sacramento 27th in terms of pace, really slow. Boston 18th, kind of mid of the pack. That's a game that we probably won't look too much into. I'm not really trusting the Kings to keep up here. Celtics, like I said, coming back home after a 5-game road trip, they're going to be ready, to show out at home. So, not one of my favorite games. Hornets at the Heat, Miami minus 10.5, 213 on the total, low total. Charlotte 22nd, Miami 16th. Miami was up there in the top 10, starting the season for the first 2 weeks, and now they're kind of floating back a little bit. Not exactly slow, but kind of middle of the pack like Boston. Obviously a great spot for the bigs here with the Heat, Bam, of course, against the Hornets. There's a couple other spots, but that one's going to be the big one. 76ers at the Raptors. No line, no total on this one. Philadelphia 17th in terms of pace, and Toronto 13th. So this one will be a decently fast-paced game. The Raptors have been pretty fast all season. They've been hanging around the top 10. Philly was actually in the top 10 a week and a half ago or, a week ago, but they've kind of slowed down a little bit. But I'm not worried about this one. That one's a game that we will look to target, Another one, Blazers and the Bulls. Portland minus 1.5 here, 226 on the total, second highest on the board right now. Portland 9th in terms of pace, Chicago 8th. So you have two teams in the top 10 here. Both teams like to run with pace. Both teams don't play a lot of defense. Obviously, this is going to be a game we're going to want to target. I think Dame Lillard goes way under-owned in this one. I don't think people look at him because you have, LBJ, Trae Young, and Dinwiddie right there, and I think people are just going to fly right over Dame. But we'll talk about that here in a second. Sorry, guys, my throat scratchy. Woke up. I've got allergies, sinuses, and all kinds of good things. So it's winter weather. Always gets me. Either way. So Blazers and Bulls, one we're definitely going to look at. Jazz at the Bucks, of course. Utah is 20th on the season in terms of pace. This one we have Milwaukee coming in here as a 5.5-point home favorite. No total on this one at the moment, but I figure this one will be a little bit higher. Utah's been running with some good pace lately. They were, in the top 10 over their last 5 games, just a couple of games ago. I'm guessing because Rudy is questionable. He had an ankle injury and didn't play the night before, so that's something we're going to want to monitor, obviously. So Utah 20th, Bucks, of course, are ranked first in terms of pace on the season at the moment. They run really, really fast. They love to push the pace, and this is going to be not a massive pace-up spot. This will be a good pace-up spot for Jazz. I'll definitely be looking for a couple people in this game. Lakers at the Spurs, LA minus 4.5 here on the road, 223 total, pretty decent high total. The Spurs have been having some pretty decently high totals here lately. For a team like the Lakers, who's been really good defensively, this is really kind of a surprising total. Obviously you kind of got to have to like some Lakers. You got to have to like some Spurs. Lakers are ranked 23rd in terms of pace on the season at the moment. Spurs are ranked 14th. The Spurs have been hanging around that top 10 spot. So the Spurs are running with a lot more pace than they usually do. It's a totally different team this year, and I like it. So finally, your late night hammer, the Thunder at the Golden State Warriors. OKC 19th, no line on this game, no total. Waiting on Draymond Green news is what I'm going to suspect. Golden State 15th. So OKC 19th, Golden State 15th. Two middle-of-the-pack teams. Golden State typically runs a little bit faster. OKC usually not. So that one obviously I kind of like the game. I think there's a lot of spots in there that we can go with. So before I go ahead and jump into the positionals, I want to talk about that tool that I was turned on to by, like I said, John and Pimba over at Fantasy Alarm. Appreciate that, John, if you're listening. It's actually called the Defense Verse Archetype tool, and it's on Court IQ, which is it's for roto grinders. It's a free tool, but I usually use the Court IQ on and off, which shows the usage with players on and off the court. It's really a great tool to use whenever you're looking at, say, like Rudy Gobert was out. You want to see who gets the most usage bump. You can use that Court IQ on and off tool to see who gets the most bump, gets the most fantasy point bump, real point bump, etc. Well, they also have a defense versus archetype tool, which is a tool that allows you to look at the different kind of positional players. Like you have the 3-and-D wing that is usually like your 3-point shooter and your defensive wing. You have your combo guards, which is like a LeBron James or Donovan Mitchell, who plays both like a shooting guard, point guard, all the guard spots. You have post big, who are, of course, post up bigs, distributors, of course, guys who dish out a lot of assists, who are mainly just facilitators. You have your versatile bigs, and then you have your shooting wings, scoring wings, and versatile forwards. So what this tool does is you can click on one of those, and it will show you what teams are, of course, allowing the most fantasy points to those types of players. So it's really good, and it's really good to analyze because it'll show you a lot of weaknesses in the defenses. Of course, a lot of players fit a lot of these different categories. You have a lot of versatile bigs like Bam Adebayo, who's a center, but he's very versatile. He's not a post-up, but of course, Charlotte, like tonight, is ranked number 2, giving up the second most fantasy points against versatile forwards. I consider Bam a very versatile forward, and he's going to be a guy that I'm going to be looking to play. Charlotte's not very good, and we've been fading that spot forever. So anyway, just kind of wanted to go over that tool in case you guys want to get on there and play around with it. Like I said, it's free to use. And it's a really good tool to kind of, like I said, see where the defenses are really weak at. I've been using it now for a couple of days, and it's kind of really helped out my researchers. It's definitely another tool you can add to your info research. It's good stuff. All right, let's jump into the positions. Point guard, LBJ, 11-2. No need to really talk much on this. 62.3 in his last game versus San Antonio. They don't really have an answer for him. San Antonio is allowing the 6th most fantasy points over their last 5 games to the point guard spot, and he's had a smidge over 31% usage over his last 5 at 31.3. So LBJ, obviously, he's high priced, but he's obviously in a good spot. Trae Young is probably the best spot for the point guard spot here, other than like Dinwiddie or something. 64.5 here in his last game versus Toronto. He has now put up 45 and 64.5 in his last 2 home games, averaging a smidge under 30% in his last 5 home games at 29.4% usage. Minnesota, we know they're not very good against the point guard spot. Jeff Teague is not exactly the greatest defensive player. And Trae, of course, had a breakout game last game, and I missed it. I literally played Trae 4 slates in a row. And then, of course, I don't play him on the slate that he goes off against Toronto. Either way, Memphis is allowing the 5th most fantasy points to the point guard spot over the last 5. They've been really bad against the spot all year. So Trae is obviously going to be in play, and I'm assuming he's going to be chalky in that game. But you will want to have some. You will have to have some Trae Young. Like I said, Dame Lillard at 8.9. This is a nice pace-up spot here against the Bulls. It is on the road, but I'm not awfully worried about that. He played heavy minutes in his return. He was kind of rusty, so not too awful worried about that, but I believe a game against the Bulls could obviously light him back up. 32.9% usage in that last game, so his usage is remaining the same. Carmelo coming in is actually pretty interesting because he's actually led the team in usage over the last 3 games. But, of course, Dame only played in 1. So that's something we just kind of need to take with a grain of salt and watch. But, of course, Dame is going to get his. I think Dame is sneaky. I really like Dame on this slate, and I think he's going to go overlooked. Dinwiddie at 7.6 put up 37, 43, 41, and 51 in his last 4. Of course, no Kyrie again, and he's averaging right around 29.3% usage rate over his last 3. He's going to continue to see big minutes. He's playing the Cavs tonight on the road. At 7.6, his price should be more like 8.5 to 9K. Thank you, DraftKings, again, for your pricing. I don't know where these guys get these prices, but his price hasn't moved in like 3 games, and he's just crushing value. So anyway, Ben Simmons at 7.3, over 38 fantasy points in his last 4 of 5, over 43 in his last 3 of 5. Toronto allowing the 9th most fantasy points to that point guard spot. Again, Trae Young just hit him up for 65 almost. So Ben Simmons is absolutely in play at 7.3 here. His price is pretty stupid too. Moving down, Chris Paul at 6.9, I think is a guy that won't go very, very, I don't think he'll have a lot of ownership. Obviously, he's 6.9. Wish he was more like 6K, but, he's put up 36, 33, 42, and 45 in his last four. In his last 4 games. I already drank 2 cups of coffee, so I've got the hiccups. It is pretty important to note that one of the tools, again, on that defense versus archetype is the distributor. Chris Paul is a distributor. He dishes out a ton of assists. I think he put up 13 last game. And Golden State is allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to distributors. So this is a really good spot for him. We know Golden State's not very good on defense. And, of course, if Draymond is in, I'm not worried about him guarding Chris Paul, even though he plays point guard Draymond. And the simple fact that he's put up, he has swapped 9 steals in his last 3 games. He swapped 4 in back-to-back games. So for you FanDuel guys, CP3 is obviously going to be a target on FanDuel. His defensive stats have jumped up quite a bit, and we know Golden State is not exactly the greatest ball handlers, and they're not very careful with the ball. So CP3 I'm totally fine with. Jeff Teague at 6'3". You get the revenge game here versus Atlanta. He's going actually back to Atlanta. So that's pretty interesting. We know that Atlanta is not that great on defense in any spot. So Jeff Teague here for the revenge games, averaging a little bit over 20% of usage on the road at 20.6%. He's put up 43.5 and 46 in his last 2 road games. So Jeff Teague at 6.3 is an absolutely great tournament play, I think. A guy that I think that DraftKings dropped the ball on again here is Malcolm Brogdon at 6K. He's been cleared to play. He's supposed to be fully active tonight. Will McMillan monitor his minutes? I'd probably say so. But as far as I know, he said he feels good. His back's good. He's good to go. And he's 6K. He's playing against Memphis, who's allowing the number 2 fantasy points or second most fantasy points to the point guard spot on the season and over the last 5. Like, Memphis is bad against the point guard spot. And, of course, we're getting a guy here at 6K who could play over 30 minutes and should be able to smash. So that'll be something I want to see. I want to see if we get any reports on his minutes, if he's going to be restricted. It'll definitely be something we need to know. So moving on, Kyle Bowman at 5.8. Of course, on the other side, I know OKC, like I said, I know CP3 has been pretty decent on the defensive side of the ball, but Kyle Bowman, if Draymond happens to sit again and he gets another start, obviously we're going to be looking at Kyle Bowman. His price is a little bit higher than we want, but he did play 36 minutes and 41.5 fantasy points in his last game. So that's something we could look at. Kobe White at 5.4. Portland is the 6th most fantasy points to the point guard spot over the last 5. We know that they are not very good at guarding the point guard spot. And he just put up almost 40 fantasy points in his last game at 39.5. He is at home. This is a good spot. It's a nice pace-up game. So Kobe White is definitely a tournament play I'll be looking to target. Rajon Rondo at 5.2, played 26 minutes last game, 33.3. He was one of my targets last game against OKC because, of course, you get a lot of Dennis Schroeder on that second unit. And Rondo is, he obviously put up, he crushed value. I think he was like under 5K. I think he was like 4.6 or 4.7 last game. And he put up 33 fantasy points. So he's had 20.7% usage over his last 5, and San Antonio, again, is allowing the 6th most fantasy points to that point guard spot. Of course, Dejounte Murray will be playing. However, he has not been starting. So I do think he started the first leg of the back-to-back, and then he sat the second one, which was on Saturday. So be interesting to see if he re-enters the starting lineup. If he does, I will feel a lot better about it. Obviously, we won't have to face him with Rondo in that second unit, so that's something we want to see. And then finally, Brad Wanamaker at 4.3. If Kemba sits, he's been getting good run over the last 3 games: 27, 27, and 30 minutes in his last 3. 22, 27, and 27 fantasy points in those 3. If Kemba happens to sit, he should probably continue to see big minutes, even if he doesn't. The Celtics are still hurting kind of at the guard spot, with Gordon Hayward down. And Marcus Smart's playing 30-something minutes. So just someone to keep in mind. Moving along to the shooting guard spot, you have Donovan Mitchell at 8.4 here, 42 or more in his last 4 or 5, over 41 in his last 6 of 7, 31.1% usage rate in his last 7. Milwaukee is allowing the 4th most fantasy points to what we call a combo guard. Again, that's that defense versus archetype tool. A combo guard, like I said, is a guard that can do it all. He's not just a shooting wing. He's not just a scoring wing. He does a little bit of everything. Donovan Mitchell is that to a T. He plays the point guard, plays the shooting guard, plays all three guard positions, and he's really good. Of course, in Milwaukee, fast, nice pace-up spot here, and, of course, it's going to be a pace-up spot for Donovan. So at 8.4, you're definitely going to want to have some Donovan Mitchell. C.J. McCollum at 8.3. He's averaging 49.4 fantasy points over his last 5, over 20 real points in his last 7 of 8, 27.6% usage in his last 5. CJ will continue to be in play. His price did not go down, which is very sad because Dame come back and we didn't get a price reduction on him. Would like to see him get back in that 6K range, but I don't think we'll be seeing that anytime soon. You guys know, if you listen to the podcast daily, that I was very high on CJ whenever he was in the 6K range, and I told you guys to keep playing him. Well, of course, circumstances did it was very indicative that we had to play him, of course, with no Dame. But the guy was shooting 22 times a game with Dame, and he still is. So C.J. McCollum, again, I hate the price, but you got to love the play against the Bulls. Andrew Wiggins, 7.6. Price is back down a little bit. He was over 8K. He was 8.3 before he sat out a few games for personal issues. I think his grandma passed away or something. Anyway, he's back, played 36 minutes in his return, put up 36 fantasy points. Atlanta, Wiggins should probably be a popular target. I have no doubt about that. He will be chalky, and I will have some. You got to, because you know what? Atlanta is allowing the number 1 most fantasy points to the small forward spot over the last 5, and they're allowing the 6th most fantasy points to the shooting guard spot. They are hemorrhaging points at that spot. Andrew Wiggins plays both. So Wiggins will absolutely be in play in that game. Zach LaVine at 7.5K here. His price didn't really go back up very much, and he just put up 60 against the Hornets. Portland is allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to the shooting guard spot over the last 5, and they've been allowing it all season long. So LaVine is just too cheap here in this game. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander at 6.7, I think, is a guy that will go overlooked. Golden State is allowing the number 2 most fantasy points to the shooting guard spot over the last 5. He has put up 40, 31, 36, and 36. 40 minutes, 31 minutes, 36, and 36 minutes in his last 4. So he's played over 31 minutes in his last 4, 2 of them at 36, and then another one at 40. So he's playing tons and tons of minutes. He's put up over 33 fantasy points in his last 3 or 4. I don't mind him against Golden State. So moving along, I had Jaylen Brown here in the shooting guard. I should have put him in small forward, but I'll go ahead and talk about him now. Jaylen Brown at 6.8, it continues to be everything that Boston has to have, especially on nights that Tatum doesn't do very well. Of course, like I said, they're returning back home after a 5-game road trip. He put up 45.5 last game versus a very good Denver team in Denver. Over 32 or more in his last 4 or 5. Kemba could be out. He's garnering right around a 24% usage rate at 23.8. Jaylen Brown, I believe, will be a great play tonight in this spot here with the Kings. The Kings on a back-to-back. They don't really guard the guard spot and the small forward spot all that well. Of course, Harrison Barnes is there at the 3. Not worried about Harrison Barnes at all. Jaylen Brown back here at home at 6.8, I think is a great tournament play. I don't think he'll have hardly any ownership, and I think it's a nice play. Alec Burks at 6.4, Golden State really has nobody else, especially if Draymond doesn't play. He's now put up over 41 in his last 2 of 3, 25.2% usage in his last 3 games. Golden State doesn't have a whole lot of scorers. He is one of the main ones. He will continue to see nice usage. He's going to continue to see huge minutes, and he will continue to be the guy, especially if Draymond's out. So totally don't mind Burks. Marcus Smart, which is who I should have had here in this point guard or shooting guard list. Over 30 minutes per game, every game, 30 or more fantasy points in his last 3. Gets a great matchup, of course, here with Sacramento. So Marcus Smart at 6K, I'm totally fine with. DeAndre Bembry? Yeah. DeAndre Bembry at 5.3, 35 and 32 minutes in his last 2, starting for Cam Reddish. If Cam Reddish returns, who knows if Cam will start. Bembry's been playing really good. 29.3 and 45.5 fantasy points in his last 2. You got a nice high-paced game here, of course, against Minnesota. So, again, if he starts again, I don't think you can afford to fade him, especially only at 5.3. So, moving along, we have at the end of the shooting guard, Tyler Hero at 4.9. He's quietly been pretty good. Put up 24 more in his last 3. He had 29, 24, and 29 in his last 3 games.
over 31 minutes in his last 3 or 4. Charlotte is allowing the number one fantasy points to that shooting guard. Number one fantasy points to the shooting guard spot over the last 5. So they're getting trashed by really good guards. Of course, he'll be playing on the second unit, which I really like as well, because he'll get Malik Monk defense, who is more worried about catching alley-oops and shooting threes than playing defense. So Tyler Hero, I like quite a bit at 4.9. Moving along, we have small forward spot here. We will talk about Jimmy Butler at 7.7, who just put up a dud against Philadelphia. Had a pretty decent game against Chicago, went to Philadelphia the next game in a double revenge, and only put up 25.3. However, Jimmy Butler has been pretty good on bounce-back days, and for the simple fact that he's put up over 50 in his last 2 of 3 still prior to that game, I don't think we're going to have to worry about Jimmy Butler here. It's a good spot against Charlotte. Charlotte's not very good. They don't really have anybody who can guard him. So at 7.7, Jimmy Butler, absolutely. DDR, DeMar DeRozan at 7.7 has been absolutely great, here as of late. 39, 42, 45, and 54 in his last 4. 28.2% usage rate in his last 4 as well. With the Lakers being down Avery Bradley, more than likely it'll be Danny Green who gets on him, and I'm totally fine with that. DeMar's been great lately. That game actually has a pretty decently high total, so DeMar's in play. DeAndre Hunter at 5.6. 34.3, 28.5, and 46.3 in his last 3. We know this is going to be, again, a high-paced game. You're going to want to have pieces of that game. Hunter has been playing really well. He's obviously flipped a switch. He's a rookie. He was a guy that we talked about preseason. I was really high on him, and now he's starting to maybe he's getting comfy. Maybe he's realizing that the Hawks have to have him, because they do. And, of course, this is another good spot for him tonight. He's only 5.6 in a very high-paced game, 235 on that total or whatever. Justin Holiday, revenge here game against Memphis. I know he played for Memphis for a year or 2. Not exactly a huge revenge game, but I had to put it in here. Plus, for the simple fact that he scored over 30 fantasy points in his last 2, 31.8 and 33.5. So Justin Holiday for the Pacers, he's there. GR3 for Golden State. He's 5.1. OKC is allowing the number 4 most fantasy points to the small forward spot, and he's put up 25 or more in his last 3 or 4. GR3 has been pretty decent. He's been consistent lately. He's getting big minutes. So I totally don't mind him right there at 5K. Rudy Gay at 5.1, 35 fantasy points in his last home game versus the Lakers. He tends to play well versus the Lakers. I don't know if he has a vendetta against them or what, but he likes to play against the Lakers. 24 more minutes in his last 3, over 30 fantasy points in his last 2 of 3. So Rudy Gay is definitely worth looking at. Power forward spot. Giannis over 55 in his last every game, pretty much. Don't really have to talk about Giannis. We know he's good. He's playing Utah. If they are missing Rudy Gobert, he will have pretty much free reign. Tony Bradley is a pretty decent defender, but nobody can guard Giannis. There's no doubt about it. So of course, Giannis, whatever. If you want to play him, I will probably have a little. Of course, it is a decent spot. It's a decent pace-up matchup here for Utah, playing in Milwaukee. And, of course, if they're missing Rudy, that's going to hurt them on the inside. They're going to be hurting defensively. So he's a great rim protector. He's a beast. So, of course, Giannis is in play, especially if Rudy's out. Siakam at Siakam at 9.8, over 50 in his last 3 of 5 on the road, 28.7% usage rate in his last 4 on the road. Again, pretty good spot here. I don't mind it. Sabonis has been really good here. 39 plus in his last 3 or 4. Of course, Memphis is not exactly great against bigs. Jaren Jackson Jr. tends to get in foul trouble very easily, so Sabonis is probably going to be a pretty big nemesis for him tonight. And we know Sabonis has just been great lately. He smashed last game, put up almost 40. He's went for over 40 in his last 6 or 7 or 8 of 8 or whatever. Sabonis is really good. He will continue to be really good. So Sabonis will be in play. Jonathan Isaac at 7.9. No Vucevic, no Aaron Gordon. He's now put up 45.8 and 51.8 in his last 2. He's now played over 30 minutes in his last 6 of 8. He's going to have to be the guy. He's going to have to play really well. And his price is up there, but the usage is there. The minutes are there. and he's been smashing. So Blake Griffin at 7-1, 34 or more in his last 3 or 4, over 30 minutes in his last 3. Orlando is allowing the 4th most fantasy points to that power forward spot over the last 5. So with Isaac moving to the 4, it means that obviously we're not too awful worried about his defense because usually he's a really good defender. But Blake Griffin at 7K, I mean, he's been at this, we've been playing him the last couple of games, and he's not really been doing what he needs to do or should do. But however, you really can't be mad about that. He's playing over 30 minutes, and he'll continue to play over 30 minutes, and he's only 7K. So continue to play Blake. Jason Tatum, again, returning back home at 6.9. Sacramento on a back-to-back. Of course, he's back at home after a 5-game road trip. Tatum has been averaging a little over 31 fantasy points at home on the year. Totally fine with Tatum at 6'9". Al Horford at 6K, 29 or more in his last 4 or 5. We know Toronto is not exactly great. Siakam is a decent defender, but he's not great. Horford can take advantage of that spot a little bit against Siakam. So Horford at 6K I'm totally fine with. Eric Paschal at 5.9. He's now played over 30 minutes in all but 6 games. He's basically played over 30 minutes in all but 1 or 2 games this whole season. He's put up 28 or more in his last 4 fantasy points. It's been really good. He's had to basically be the guy beside Burks and Bowman on that team without Draymond. So if he doesn't if Draymond doesn't end up playing again, he'll garner a lot of usage again. Robert Covington at 5.9. Of course, we got this nice pace-up game again. Atlanta is allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to the power forward spot over the last 5, and he has put up over 30 fantasy points in his last 3 or 4. So Rocco will be a decent target at 5.9. Larry Nance at 5.7. Brooklyn is here on a back-to-back. We know we fade all of the Nets bigs. He put up 33 fantasy points last game in 32 minutes as he started for Kevin Love. If, for whatever reason, Love is out again, I don't see any reason to fade Nance. Belicia for the Kings here at 5.6. Boston, of course, is allowing the 9th most fantasy points to that power forward spot. Over 31 or more in his last 3 or 4, 31 or more minutes in his last 3 or 4. So Belicia has been getting it done for the Kings. Of course, they are on a back-to-back in Boston, but I think he's really cheap for the minutes he's been getting and for the production he's been putting up. So don't mind him a bit. Carmelo Anthony at 5K, 24. What did I say? What did I put here? 24, 29, and 35 minutes in his last 3, was like I said, he's leading the team in the usage right now. Of course, Dame is back, so that might change, but he's had a 29.1% usage rate over his last 3. He's playing big minutes now. He's starting at the 4. As long as Hassan is out, he's going to continue to play big minutes. They need bigs. They're hurting really bad. So Carmelo at 5K, I mean, you can't hate it. So that rounds out the power forward spot. Let's move over to the center. Karl Anthony Towns versus Atlanta. I'm not even going to talk about it. Play him. I'm not playing AD tonight. He only had 20 fantasy points in this first game in San Antonio against the Spurs. I'm not just a huge fan of AD. I'd rather play LBJ and KT and Giannis. Those are probably my top spin-ups. Andre Drummond at 8.7. No Vucevic here for Orlando. Another part of that archetype defense tool is Orlando's allowing the 3rd most fantasy points to versatile bigs. Drummond is a very versatile big. This is a really nice spot for him. Over 42 in his last 3 or 4. Orlando's allowing the 8th most fantasy points to the center spot over the last 5 games, and he's put up over 41 in his last 5 at home. So Drummond at 8.7, his price is still very, very playable. Bam Adebayo, again, at 7.1 versus Charlotte. We know Charlotte's not very good against the center spot. Over 33 fantasy points in his last 3 at home, and Charlotte's allowing the number 2 most fantasy points to versatile big. So Bam is a great play as well at 7.1. Tristan Thompson at 6.8. We know Brooklyn is hemorrhaging points to the center spot, and they are allowing the number 2 fantasy points to post bigs, which is he can be considered a post or kind of a versatile, but he's not really a crafty big. He's more of a post big. He stays down low a lot. That's where he makes a lot of his money, is in rebounds and in short shots. He's not, we did see the clip of him, doing the behind-the-back dribbles, taking the ball up the court, looking like he was running point guard Draymond. But that's not Tristan Thompson. Neither way, it's Charlotte. It's a good game. He's 6.8K. He's put up 42.3 his last game. We know that we're fading their bigs. So he will be in play. Rashawn Holmes at 6.2. We know Boston struggles against bigs as well, and he's put up over 43 in his last 2 of 3. So Rashawn Holmes will be in play again. One of my kind of favorite value plays is Steven Adams at 5.4. He put up 32.5, I think, fantasy points against this Golden State team last time, and he's 5.4K. We know Golden State is not very good versus centers. And actually, Golden State is allowing the most fantasy points to post bigs. So, yeah, over 33 in his last 2 of 3. I'm totally fine with Steven Adams. Moving along, we have Marquise Chris in that same game. He's 5K, and he has put up over 25 fantasy points in his last 3. He's played over 21 minutes in his last 3. Of course, Golden State is hurting at the center spot. All they have is Willie Cauley-Stein. He's been playing well off the bench, so he's going to get a lot of Nerlens Noel. I'm totally fine with Marquise Chris here. Hopefully he can stay out of foul trouble. Of course, on the Rudy Gobert situation, if his ankle is not good for tonight to go, we will obviously be looking at Tony Bradley against Milwaukee, who gives up decent amounts of points to that center spot. He played 22 minutes in last night's game, or last night or game before, whatever game it was, the game before, not before, sorry, Saturday. Played 22 minutes, put up 26.3 fantasy points. So if he happens to get another start, he will be a nice streamer. He's very cheap, like 4K-ish. So Tony Bradley will be one to look at in the event that Rudy sits. All right. That's it. This pod lasted a little bit longer, but of course there was a lot to talk about. It's a big 11-game slate. There's a lot to like. Obviously, this is just a first look podcast. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will talk about the rest of the slate later on today. Enjoy your Monday.